I've lived in the city long enough to know that Tinder is mostly a game of curated lies. Everyone presents a polished version of themselves, filters, travel photos, and clever bios. My own profile was no different. I was Alex, a freelance graphic designer who liked craft beer and obscure vinyl. I was looking for something real, or at least something that felt real for a night. That's when I swiped right on Maddie. Maddie's profile was hauntingly simple. Only one photo, a black and white shot of a woman standing in a hallway, her face partially obscured by the shadow of a doorway. Her bio read, "I see things others miss. Want to see them with me?" It was pretentious, sure, but in a world of "I love tacos and travel," it was enough to make me stop. We matched instantly. The conversation didn't follow the usual script. No, "How is your week going?" or "Where are you from?" She sent me a GPS coordinate, nothing else. I checked it on my phone. It was an old industrial park on the edge of the river, a place where the city's gentrification had stuttered and died. "Meet me at 9 p.m. Bring a flashlight," her next message said. Against my better judgment, against every survival instinct I'd honed living in a city, I went. I told myself it was an urban exploration date. I told myself it was edgy. The industrial park was a graveyard of rusted, corrugated iron and shattered glass. I parked my car under a flickering street lamp that smelled like ozone. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the highway. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the thick, humid air. "Maddie?" I called out. My voice felt small, swallowed by the darkness. "Up here," a voice whispered. It didn't come from the ground. I tilted my light upward. She was perched on a fire escape 3 stories up, her legs dangling over the edge. In the harsh LED light, she looked exactly like her photo, pale, dark-eyed, and wearing a coat that looked 40 years out of style. I climbed the rusted stairs, the metal groaning under my weight. When I reached the landing, she didn't stand up. She just pointed toward a gap in the brickwork where a window had once been. "Inside," she said. "The history of this place is written in the things people left behind." We spent the next hour wandering through the skeletal remains of a textile mill. Maddie was a strange guide. She didn't talk about herself. She pointed out discarded shoes, piles of rotted ledgers, and a single broken doll sitting on a workbench. She spoke about these items with a terrifying intimacy, as if she knew the people who had owned them. "You're very quiet, Alex," she said, her voice echoing in the vast, hollow space. We were in the basement now, a place that smelled of damp earth and stale grease. "Are you afraid of the dark, or just what's in it?" "I'm just trying not to trip on a rusty nail," I joked. But my heart was beginning to pace. She stopped in front of a heavy iron door. It was slightly ajar. This was the archive, the deep storage. No one has been in here since 1974. She pushed the door open. My flashlight beam swept the room. It was filled with filing cabinets, but they weren't for business. They were covered in stickers, thousands of them, photos of people, Polaroids mostly. I walked closer, my breath hitching. These weren't old photos. Some were fresh. I saw a man at a grocery store, a woman pumping gas, a teenager sitting on a park bench. All of them were taken from a distance. All of them were candid. "What is this, Maddie?" I asked, my hand trembling. "The things people miss," she whispered. I reached the end of the last row of cabinets. There was a small desk with a laptop. The screen was on. It was a Tinder interface. Not her Tinder, mine. I stared at the screen. It wasn't just my profile, it was a log. A detailed, minute-by-minute log of my life for the last 3 weeks. 8:14 a.m. Subject leaves apartment, wears blue jacket. 12:45 p.m. Subject eats lunch at Joe's Deli, orders pastrami. 6:30 p.m. Subject matches with Maddie. My blood turned to ice. I turned around to confront her, but the basement was empty. My flashlight beam swung wildly across the room. She was gone. Then the laptop chirped, a new message on Tinder from Maddie. "Look behind the cabinet, Alex." I pushed the heavy metal cabinet aside. It screeched against the concrete. Behind it, there was a small, crawl-space-sized room. I shone my light inside. It wasn't a room. It was a shrine. The walls were covered in photos of me. Me sleeping through my bedroom window. Me taking out the trash. Me typing at my desk. And in the center of the room, on a small stool, was a tripod with a camera. The red recording light was blinking. The camera was pointed at me, right now. I heard the iron door of the archive slam shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I sprinted to the door and pulled at the handle. It was locked from the outside. "Maddie, open the door!" I screamed, kicking the metal. Silence. Then a low electronic hum. The laptop screen changed. It was a live feed. I saw myself through the lens of the camera in the crawl space, looking terrified. The feed was being broadcast. The title of the stream was "The Final Match, Alex." I looked at the viewer count. 1. The viewer's username was Maddie. I spent 6 hours in that basement before the police found me. A passerby had heard my screaming. When they searched the industrial park, they found no trace of a woman named Maddie. The GPS coordinates led to a phone that had been reported stolen 3 months ago. The laptop was wiped clean. Everything, the photos, the logs, the stream, was gone. I moved across the country, changed my name, and I never touch dating apps. But last week, I got a notification on my new phone, a "people you may know" suggestion on a different social media platform. It was a black and white photo of a woman in a hallway. Her face was in shadow. The bio was different this time. It said, "I'm still watching, Alex. You're much more interesting when you're scared." Now, every time I walk past a dark window or a half-open door, I wonder if I'm the only one in the room, or if I'm just providing content for a subscriber who never sleeps. The match felt like a stroke of luck. Her name was Elena, a restoration architect with a penchant for black and white photography and obscure poetry. She didn't want to meet at a bar or a coffee shop. "Too loud," she texted. "Too performative. I'm renovating an old estate on the edge of the county. Come over for dinner. I'll show you what a house looks like when it's breathing again." I should have stayed home, but Tinder has a way of making you ignore the hair on the back of your neck when the profile picture looks like a Renaissance painting. The drive took nearly 90 minutes. The city lights faded into the rear view, replaced by the suffocating darkness of old-growth forests. My GPS struggled, the blue line flickering over unmapped dirt roads. Finally, the estate appeared, a massive, sprawling Victorian structure that looked less like it was being restored and more like it was being consumed by the surrounding ivy. Elena met me at the door. She was stunning in a way that felt fragile, like pressed flowers. She led me through a foyer that smelled intensely of cedar and wet plaster. "Careful where you step," she whispered, her hand cold as she guided me. "The house is sensitive to strangers." The first 2 hours were almost normal. We sat in a grand dining room lit by a dozen beeswax candles. We drank wine that tasted of iron and dark berries. Elena talked about spatial memory, the idea that rooms remember the people who lived in them. She spoke with a passion that bordered on mania, her eyes never leaving my face. "Every wall has a pulse, Elias," she said, leaning across the table. "Most people think a house is just wood and stone. They're wrong. A house is an organism, and right now it's getting to know you." I laughed, trying to break the tension, but the sound felt flat, swallowed by the heavy velvet curtains. "I think I've had enough wine," I said, standing up. "Maybe I should head back before the fog gets too thick." Elena's smile didn't fall, but it didn't look like a smile anymore. It looked like a grimace. "Oh, you can't leave yet. The doors have already made up their minds." I walked toward the foyer, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud on the hardwood. I reached the massive oak front door and pulled. It didn't budge. I turned the deadbolt, but the keyhole was gone, just a smooth patch of wood where the lock should have been. I tried the windows, but the glass felt like solid stone, cold and immovable. "Elena, this isn't funny," I shouted, turning back. But the dining room was gone. Where the grand archway had been, there was now a narrow, wallpapered hallway that hadn't been there a minute ago. The candles were gone, replaced by a flickering, sickly yellow bulb hanging from a frayed wire. I ran down the hallway, calling her name, but every door I opened led to the same room, a small, windowless space with a single chair and a mirror. I looked in the mirror and my breath hitched. My reflection was delayed. I moved my hand, and a second later, the me in the glass followed. Panic, raw and jagged, set in. I began to kick at the walls, but the lath and plaster felt like muscle, firm and yielding, then snapping back into place. I ran back into the hallway, but it had shortened. The walls were physically moving, inching closer with a sound like grinding teeth. "Elena, let me out!" Her voice came from the walls themselves, a distorted, multi-layered echo. "The house needs a new heart, Elias. It's been so cold since the last one stopped beating. You're such a vibrant match. Your pulse? It's perfect." I found a crawl space near the floor and dove in, dragging myself through the dust and cobwebs. I could hear the house shifting above me, the joists groaning, the floorboards snapping like ribs. I realized then that the house wasn't being restored. Elena was feeding it. I crawled for what felt like miles, the space getting tighter and tighter until I could barely expand my lungs to breathe. Finally, I saw a sliver of moonlight. I kicked at a rotted wooden grate and tumbled out onto the wet grass of the backyard. I didn't look back. I sprinted for my car, but the driveway was gone. Where my car had been parked, there was now only a dense thicket of thorns. I had to run through the woods, the branches clawing at my skin until I reached the main road. I called the police from a gas station. When they took me back to the coordinates, there was no estate, no Victorian house, no ivy, just an empty, scorched clearing with a blackened foundation that had been burned to the ground in the 1920s. "You must have been lost, son," the officer said, looking at my torn clothes and bleeding hands with suspicion. "Nothing has lived here for a century." I tried to believe him. I really did. But when I got home, I opened my Tinder one last time to delete my account. There was a new message from Elena. "You left your scarf in the hallway, Elias. Don't worry, the house is keeping it warm for you. It still has the scent of your neck. It's enough, for now." I went to my closet to check. My favorite wool scarf was gone. And when I put my ear against the wall of my own bedroom, I didn't hear the hum of the city or the wind outside. I heard a slow, wet thumping. A heartbeat. And it was perfectly synced with mine. I've always considered myself a rational man. I'm a high school biology teacher, a person who deals in facts, classifications, and observable data. I don't believe in ghosts, and I certainly didn't believe in the gut feelings my friends always talked about when it came to dating. To me, Tinder was just a digital extension of the natural world, a way to find a mate based on shared traits and visual cues. Then I met Clara. Her profile didn't scream for attention. In a sea of neon bikinis and forced smiles at rooftop bars, Clara was an anomaly. She had only 3 photos. One was a silhouette against a foggy lake, another was a close-up of her hands holding a vintage anatomy book, and the last was a candid shot of her in a library. She was beautiful, but it was a cold beauty, like a marble statue left in the rain. Her bio was a single sentence: "I appreciate the things that last forever." We matched on a Tuesday. By Thursday, we were meeting at the Crow's Nest, a bar so far underground that the air felt recycled and heavy. I arrived early, my heart doing that annoying, rhythmic thumping against my ribs. When she walked in, the room seemed to get quieter. She wore a high-collared black dress made of a heavy, velvet-like material. Her skin was so pale it looked luminous in the dim, amber light of the bar. "Mark," she said, and even my name sounded different coming from her. It sounded like a specimen being labeled. The first hour was intoxicating. She was brilliant. We talked about evolution, the preservation of ancient texts, and the beauty of symmetry. But as the second drink arrived, the conversation took a sharp, clinical turn. She started asking questions that I now realize were a checklist. "Do you live alone, Mark?" she asked, leaning in. Her eyes weren't just hazel, they had these strange, golden flecks that seemed to pulse. "Is your apartment building secure? Do you have family nearby who check on you?" I laughed, thinking she was just being a modern woman concerned about safety. "It's just me and my books. My closest relative is a cousin in Seattle. Why, planning a heist?" She didn't laugh, she just smiled, a slow, thin movement of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "I just like to know that when I find something special, it won't be interrupted." "I have something I want to show you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I have a private collection. It's rare. Most men, they don't have the stomach for it. But you're a biologist. You understand the necessity of preservation." My curiosity, fueled by 3 fingers of bourbon and her magnetic presence, overrode my common sense. We stepped out into the freezing night and hailed a taxi. We drove for 20 minutes into a part of the city where the streetlights were all smashed and the buildings looked like hollowed-out husks. We stopped in front of a massive, pre-war brownstone. The lobby smelled of dust and old wax. The elevator was out of order, its brass doors etched with decades of grime. We climbed 5 flights of stairs. Clara didn't breathe hard once. She moved like a shadow, silent and fluid. When she reached her door, she produced a heavy iron key. The moment she opened the door, a wave of cold air hit me. It didn't smell like a home. There was no scent of cooking, no laundry detergent, no perfume. It smelled of ozone, industrial bleach, and something underlying it. A sweet, cloying, metallic scent that made the hair on my arms stand up. The apartment was a white void. No rugs, no television, no comfortable chairs. Just rows upon rows of tall, glass-fronted cabinets. They were illuminated from within by sterile, white LED strips. "Go on," she urged, standing by the door. "Look." I walked to the first cabinet. I expected butterflies, maybe rare coins. Instead, I saw a row of small, crystal-clear jars. Inside the first one was a gold Rolex. It was beautiful, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw that the watch was still fastened around a wrist. A human wrist. The skin was a pale, waxy gray, perfectly preserved, with the stitching at the severed end visible through the glass. My stomach did a violent flip. "Clara, what is this?" "Preservation," she said, walking up behind me. I could hear the rustle of her velvet dress. "Photos fade, memories lie, but the physical form, if treated with the right chemicals, it stays perfect. Every man I've ever truly loved is in this room, a piece of them anyway, the piece I liked best." I moved to the next cabinet, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I saw a wedding ring still on a finger. I saw a pair of silver cufflinks pinned through a patch of skin from a forearm. I saw a pair of glasses resting on a bridge of a nose that had been meticulously removed and cured. "You see, Mark," she said, and I felt something cold and sharp touch the back of my neck. I froze. Relationships are so messy. They end in arguments, in aging, in betrayal. But here, in my jars, they are forever. They are exactly as I remember them on our best night. I slowly turned around. Clara was holding a surgical scalpel. Her face was calm, almost angelic, but those golden eyes were wide and vacant. "You have such exquisite collarbones," she whispered. "The symmetry is breathtaking. I've been looking for a set like yours for the center display. It's the only piece I'm missing." Terror, sharp and hot, finally broke through my shock. As she stepped forward, I lunged. I didn't try to fight her, I just wanted to get past her. I collided with a small marble pedestal, sending a jar crashing to the floor. The glass shattered and a preserved human ear skidded across the hardwood, stopping near my boot. I scrambled for the door, my fingers fumbling with the heavy deadbolt. I could hear her behind me, not running but walking with a terrifying, measured pace. Clack, clack, clack. "Don't run, Mark," she called out, her voice sweet and melodic. "It will only ruin the tension in the skin. Adrenaline makes the curing process so much more difficult." I threw the door open and sprinted into the hallway. I didn't wait for the stairs. I practically threw myself down the flights, my hands raw from gripping the banister. I heard her voice echoing from the top of the stairwell, but it wasn't her speaking. It was a recording. It was my voice from the bar played back on a loop. "I appreciate the things that last forever. I appreciate the things that last forever." I burst out into the street and ran until my lungs burned like they were filled with acid. I didn't stop until I saw a police cruiser parked near a 24-hour diner. When the police went to the apartment 2 hours later, they found it completely empty. Not just the cabinets, everything. The walls had been freshly painted white. There was no furniture, no jars, no Clara. The landlord said the unit had been vacant for months. I tried to tell myself I had imagined it, a vivid hallucination brought on by stress. But 3 days later, I found a small package on my doorstep. There was no return address. Inside was a small, velvet-lined box. I opened it. Resting on the silk was a small, dried piece of skin. It was from a thumb. And on it, tattooed in microscopic detail, was my own name. Mark. I looked at my own thumb. It was intact. But then I looked closer at the skin in the box. It had a small scar, the same scar I got when I was 8 years old playing in the woods. I don't know how she did it. I don't know whose skin she gave me that looked exactly like mine. But now, every time I go to sleep, I check the locks 3 times. And every time I look in the mirror, I don't see a biology teacher. I see a centerpiece. I see something that Clara is just waiting to come back and collect.